The child hadn't spoken in 3 years, not a single word since her mother's death. Healers came from distant kingdoms. Mystics whispered incantations over her sleeping form, and the most powerful witches in the realm tried everything: potions, spells, desperate rituals under blood moons. Nothing worked. Princess Neve remained silent, locked inside herself, her gray eyes holding secrets no one could reach. The Alpha King had stopped hoping long ago. Kael of Valdris, the most feared ruler in 7 kingdoms, had watched his daughter retreat into silence and decided that perhaps some wounds simply could not heal. He buried his grief in cold duty and colder walls, forbidding anyone from pushing the child, from forcing her to speak before she was ready. If she would ever be ready. Then she came. Seren. An Omega servant with no status, no name worth remembering, no right to even look upon royalty. She was assigned to the child's chambers as a last resort, a temporary replacement when all other caretakers had failed or fled. No one expected anything to change. But the morning Princess Neve walked into the Great Hall during a trial that would determine the fate of everyone she loved, she did something that would shatter the court forever. She pointed at the Omega Maid standing frozen before the throne, and she spoke. One word. Just one. But it changed everything. Mama. The hall erupted. The king went pale, and Seren realized that single word might cost her everything: her position, her secrets, perhaps even her life. Because she wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to exist. And she certainly wasn't supposed to make the silent princess speak. The servants' quarters in the eastern wing of Valdris Castle smelled of damp stone and old misery. Seren had grown accustomed to both. She rose before dawn like always, her thin blanket offering little comfort against the perpetual chill that seeped through the walls. Around her, the other Omega servants stirred in their narrow cots, none speaking, and none making eye contact. That was the first rule she'd learned upon arriving 3 months ago. Omegas didn't look at each other. Looking meant acknowledging. Acknowledging meant caring. And caring was a luxury none of them could afford. Seren dressed quickly in the rough gray uniform that marked her station, the lowest of the low in a castle that housed hundreds of servants. She was 23 years old and had been running for 5 of those years, moving from village to village, territory to territory, always staying one step ahead of the shadows that hunted her. Valdris had seemed safe, remote, a kingdom so obsessed with its own grief that no one paid attention to a nameless Omega with forged papers and a talent for disappearing into walls. She'd been wrong about the safe part. But she was still alive, so perhaps she hadn't been entirely wrong. The head housekeeper, a stern beta woman named Odessa, was waiting in the corridor when Seren emerged. This was unusual. Odessa never waited for anyone, let alone an Omega who had only been in service for 3 months. You, Odessa said, her voice flat, come with me. Seren's heart stuttered. Had they found her? Had someone finally connected the nameless servant to the girl who'd fled Thornwick 5 years ago? She kept her expression blank, her scent carefully controlled, and revealing nothing. Yes, ma'am. They walked through corridors that grew progressively grander, rough stone giving way to polished marble, bare walls transforming into tapestries depicting the Valdris royal lineage. Seren had never been to this part of the castle. Omegas of her rank cleaned kitchens and scrubbed floors in forgotten hallways. They didn't walk on carpets worth more than their lives. The princess needs a new caretaker, Odessa said without preamble. The last one resigned this morning. The 3 before her requested transfers. We're running out of options. Seren blinked. The princess, ma'am? Princess Neve, the king's daughter. Odessa's jaw tightened. You haven't heard the stories. Everyone had heard the stories. The child who stopped speaking the day her mother died. The little girl who wandered the castle like a wraith, who hadn't smiled or cried or uttered a single sound in 3 years. Some said she was cursed. Others said the grief had simply broken something inside her that couldn't be fixed. I've heard some things, Seren admitted carefully. Then you know this assignment is difficult. Odessa stopped before a set of ornate double doors carved with wolves and moons. The child doesn't respond to anyone. She doesn't eat properly, barely sleeps, and has driven away every caretaker we've assigned. Normally, someone of your rank wouldn't even be considered, but we have no one else willing to try. The words stung, though Seren kept her face neutral. Someone of your rank. Meaning worthless. Meaning expendable. What happened to the previous caretakers? Seren asked. The princess bit one, scratched another badly enough to scar. The most recent one claims the child simply stared at her for 3 hours without blinking until she couldn't take it anymore. Odessa's expression flickered with something almost like pity. The king doesn't force his daughter to interact with anyone. If she rejects you, you'll be reassigned to the stables. If she harms you, that's your burden to bear. If you harm her, in any way. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I understand, Seren said quietly. Odessa studied her for a long moment. You're different from the others. I noticed it when you arrived. You don't flinch, don't cower, and don't cry when the other servants are cruel. You just endure. Seren said nothing. Enduring was all she knew how to do. Perhaps that's what the child needs, Odessa murmured, almost to herself. Someone who understands what it means to survive. She pushed open the doors. The nursery was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a room filled with toys that had never been played with. Books whose spines had never been cracked, a canopied bed draped in silver silk. Everything was pristine, perfect, untouched. And in the center of it all, sitting on the floor with her knees drawn to her chest, was the princess. Princess Neve was small for her age, barely more than a wisp of a child with pale skin and hair so light it seemed almost white. She wore a nightgown of dove gray, and her feet were bare despite the chill. But it was her eyes that made Seren's breath catch. Gray eyes, deep as winter storms, and utterly, completely empty. No curiosity, no fear, no recognition that someone had entered her space. Just nothing. Princess, Odessa said, her voice softer than Seren had ever heard it. This is Seren. She's going to be taking care of you for a while. The child didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge them at all. Odessa sighed. Her meals are delivered 3 times a day. She needs to eat more than she does. She needs to bathe, to dress, to have her hair brushed. The previous caretakers found these tasks challenging. She turned to Seren. Good luck. You'll need it. Then she was gone, the doors closing behind her with a soft click. Seren stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The child still hadn't moved, hadn't looked at her, and hadn't shown any sign of awareness. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy and thick and suffocating. Slowly, carefully, Seren lowered herself to the floor several feet away from the princess. She didn't approach, didn't reach out, didn't try to force interaction. She simply sat. Minutes passed, perhaps an hour. The sunlight shifted across the floor, marking time that seemed to have no meaning in this frozen room. And then, so subtle Seren almost missed it, Princess Neve's eyes moved. Just a flicker, a momentary slide toward where Seren sat motionless on the cold stone. It was nothing. Less than nothing. A reflexive glance that meant absolutely nothing at all. But for a child who hadn't acknowledged another living being in 3 years, it was everything. Seren's heart began to pound, because in that single, fleeting moment, she'd seen something flicker in those empty gray eyes. Recognition. For 3 days, Seren did nothing but sit. She arrived at dawn, settled herself on the floor a respectful distance from Princess Neve, and simply existed in the same space. She didn't speak, didn't try to coax the child to eat, didn't attempt to brush the tangled white hair or change the wrinkled nightgown. She just sat, quiet and still, letting the princess grow accustomed to her presence the way a wounded animal might slowly accept a patient hand. The other servants thought she was mad. She heard them whispering when they delivered the princess's untouched meals. She just sits there. Hasn't even tried to get the child dressed. The king will have her head when he finds out. Let them whisper, Seren thought. She understood something they didn't. Something the previous caretakers had failed to grasp. Princess Neve wasn't broken. She was protecting herself. Seren recognized the signs because she'd done the same thing. After her mother's death, after her father's betrayal, after everything she'd lost, she'd retreated so far inside herself that the outside world had ceased to exist. It had taken years to claw her way back, and even now, parts of her remained buried in that internal darkness. The princess was still hiding, and no amount of forced interaction would draw her out. She needed to choose to emerge on her own. So Seren waited. On the fourth day, something changed. Seren was sitting in her usual spot, watching dust motes dance in the morning light, when she heard it. A soft rustle of fabric. She kept her eyes forward, her breathing steady, and her scent deliberately calm and unthreatening. The rustle came again. Closer this time. Then, at the very edge of her vision, a small pale hand reached out. The princess's fingers hovered just inches from Serene's arm, not touching, not quite, but closer than she'd allowed anyone to get in 3 years. Seren held perfectly still, her heart hammering against her ribs, not daring to move or breathe or do anything that might startle the child back into her shell. The fingers trembled, retreated slightly, returned. And then, feather light, they brushed against Serene's wrist. The touch lasted less than a heartbeat. A ghost of contact, barely there at all. But when Seren finally allowed herself to turn her head, she found Princess Neve staring at her with those gray eyes that weren't quite so empty anymore. Something flickered there. Something alive. Then the child withdrew, retreating to her corner of the room, and the moment was over. But Seren's hands were shaking. By the end of the first week, the princess had moved her sitting spot. Instead of the center of the room, she now positioned herself just 3 feet from where Seren sat each day. Not touching, not interacting, but present, aware, choosing to be near. The servants noticed. The whispers changed. The child moved. She's never done that before. What did that Omega do to her? Nothing, Seren wanted to say. I did nothing but give her space to decide for herself. But she kept quiet, kept her head down, kept enduring. On the 10th day, Princess Neve did something that made Seren's eyes sting with unexpected tears. They were sitting in their usual positions, Seren still, the princess slightly closer than before, when the child reached into the pocket of her nightgown and withdrew something small. A wooden figure, crudely carved but recognizable as a wolf. She held it for a long moment, studying it with those fathomless eyes. Then she placed it on the floor between them, not quite offering it, not quite keeping it, just sharing its existence. Serene understood. She reached into her own pocket, where she kept the only possession she'd managed to hold onto through 5 years of running, and withdrew a small stone, smooth and black, veined with gold. Her mother's worry stone, the only piece of her past she'd refused to abandon. She placed it on the floor beside the wooden wolf. The princess stared at it. Then, slowly, her gaze lifted to Seren's face. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, 2 broken creatures who'd found something fragile and precious in the wreckage of their lives. Connection. The princess didn't smile, but something in her expression softened, just slightly, like ice beginning to thaw at the edges. It was enough. It was more than enough. The summons came that evening. Odessa appeared at the nursery door, her expression troubled. The king wishes to see you. Seren's blood turned to ice. Now? Immediately. She followed Odessa through corridors she'd never seen, each more imposing than the last, until they reached a set of massive doors guarded by wolves in human form, alpha warriors whose presence made Seren's Omega instincts scream at her to run. She didn't run. She'd learned long ago that running only delayed the inevitable. The doors opened. The king's study was dark despite the afternoon hour, heavy curtains blocking most of the light. A fire burned in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with maps and weapons, and standing by the window, his back to the door, was Alpha King Kyle. She'd seen him before, of course. Distant glimpses across crowded halls, official processions where servants lined up to bow as he passed. But she'd never been this close, never felt the full weight of his presence pressing down on her like a physical force. He was tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sliver of light seeping through the curtains and hair the color of midnight that fell past his collar. When he turned, his eyes caught the firelight, gleaming amber and gold, the eyes of a wolf barely contained in human skin. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp, dangerous, made for destruction. "Leave us," he said, his voice a low rumble that Seren felt in her bones. Odessa bowed and retreated. The doors closed. Seren stood alone with the most powerful alpha in 7 kingdoms. "You're the new caretaker." It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You've been with my daughter for 10 days. He moved closer, each step measured, predatory. "In that time, you've managed to accomplish what dozens of others could not." Seren kept her eyes lowered, her scent locked down tight. "I've done very little, Your Majesty. Don't lie to me." The command cracked through the air like a whip. "Odessa reports that my daughter has moved closer to you voluntarily, that she touched you, that she shared one of her possessions with you." News traveled fast in this castle. Too fast. "She's beginning to trust me," Seren said carefully. "That's all." "That's all?" The king laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My daughter hasn't trusted anyone since her mother died. She hasn't willingly touched another person, hasn't shared anything with anyone, and you've achieved this in 10 days by doing nothing?" Seren finally looked up, meeting those burning amber eyes despite every instinct screaming at her to submit. "Sometimes, nothing is exactly what someone needs, Your Majesty. Your daughter has been pushed and prodded and forced to interact when she wasn't ready. I simply gave her space to come to me when she chose." The king stared at her. His expression was unreadable, his scent so tightly controlled she couldn't sense anything from him. Not approval, not anger, not anything at all. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The question made her stomach drop. "Seren, Your Majesty. A servant from—" "I didn't ask for your name and station. I asked who you are." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the flecks of darker gold in his eyes. "I've ruled this kingdom for 15 years. I've learned to read people. And you, little Omega, are hiding something." Her heart hammered. Her carefully controlled scent wavered. "We're all hiding something, Your Majesty," she heard herself say. "That doesn't make us dangerous." The king's eyes narrowed. For a terrible moment she thought he would demand the truth, would rip away the fragile safety she'd built over 5 years of running and hiding and surviving. But then he stepped back. "Continue your work with my daughter," he said, his voice cold again. "If she keeps improving, you'll be rewarded. If she regresses, or if I discover you've harmed her in any way—" He didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. "Yes, Your Majesty." She turned to leave, her legs trembling beneath her when his voice stopped her at the door. "Seren." She froze. "My daughter's last caretaker was found selling information about Neve's condition to foreign courts. The one before that was discovered trying to steal hair from Neve's brush for a witch's ritual." His voice dropped to something almost soft, almost dangerous. "I protect what's mine. Do not forget that." Seren nodded once and fled. The dreams started 3 weeks into Seren's assignment. She'd wake gasping in her narrow cot, her thin blanket soaked with sweat, the echoes of flames still dancing behind her eyes. In the dreams, she was always running, through burning corridors, past screaming faces, toward a door that kept moving further away no matter how fast she ran. And behind her, always behind her, the voice of the man who destroyed everything. You can't escape what you are, little wolf. You can't escape what you've done. She hadn't done anything. That was the cruelest part. She was innocent, and yet she'd been running for 5 years, would probably run for the rest of her life, because no one would believe the word of an Omega over the man who'd condemned her. But the dreams were getting worse. The closer she grew to Princess Neve, the more the nightmares clawed at her, as if her own guilt was trying to warn her. You'll destroy this too. You destroy everything you touch. She buried it down, locked it away, kept enduring. Because for the first time in 5 years, something mattered more than her own survival. A month after her arrival, Princess Neve did something extraordinary. They were in the nursery as usual, sitting together in the patch of sunlight that warmed the cold stone floor. The princess had graduated to sitting directly beside Seren now, their shoulders almost touching, her small hand occasionally brushing against Seren's arm as if testing whether the contact was still permitted. It was. It always would be. Seren had brought a hairbrush with her that morning, not to use, just to have nearby. The princess's hair had grown more tangled over the past weeks, the white strands knotting together in ways that had to be uncomfortable. But Seren hadn't pushed. She'd simply placed the brush on the floor between them, an offering the child could accept or ignore. For a week, Neve had ignored it. Today, she picked it up. Seren held her breath as the princess turned the brush over in her small hands, studying it with the intensity she brought to everything. Then, without warning, she turned and held it out toward Seren. Not to her. Toward her. An unmistakable request. Seren's eyes stung. You want me to brush your hair? The princess didn't respond verbally. She still hadn't spoken, might never speak again, but she shifted position, turning her back to Seren and waiting. With trembling hands, Seren took the brush and began to work through the tangles, gentle and slow, pausing whenever she encountered a knot to ease it apart rather than pull. The princess sat perfectly still, her breathing deep and even, her small body relaxing by degrees until she was leaning back against Seren's chest. Trust. Pure and complete. Seren had to blink back tears. When she finished, the princess's hair fell in soft white waves down her back, shining in the sunlight like spun silver. Neve turned, examined a strand, and then did something that stopped Seren's heart entirely. She smiled. Small. Fleeting. Gone almost before it appeared. But real. The first smile in 3 years. Seren pulled the child into her arms without thinking, holding her close, breathing in the sweet scent of innocence and trust and something achingly like hope. The princess didn't stiffen or pull away. She simply settled against Seren's chest, her small hand fisting in the fabric of Seren's dress, and let herself be held. I've got you, Seren whispered. I've got you, little one. They stayed like that until the sun shifted and shadows crept across the floor, neither willing to break the fragile perfection of the moment. You've bewitched her. The voice came from behind, sharp as broken glass. Seren turned to find a woman standing in the nursery doorway, tall, elegant, with hair the color of burnished copper and eyes like frozen emeralds. She wore a gown of deep green silk that probably cost more than Seren would earn in 10 lifetimes, and the crown of interwoven gold leaves on her head marked her as royalty. Lady Brenna, the king's younger sister. Seren had heard the servants whisper about her, beautiful, ambitious, and furious that her brother's grief had kept him from remarrying and producing a proper heir. With Neve silent and seemingly broken, many had expected the king to eventually set aside his daughter and name Brenna's future children as successors. Until now. My lady. Seren rose quickly, keeping her body between the princess and this sharp-eyed threat. I didn't hear you enter. Obviously. Brenna glided into the room, her gaze raking over Neve with barely concealed disdain. My niece appears to have developed an attachment to you. How unexpected. The princess had retreated behind Seren's legs, her small fingers gripping the fabric of Seren's dress. She could feel the child trembling slightly, could scent the first hints of fear seeping through her usual blank calm. Neve was afraid of this woman. Seren's protective instincts flared hot and immediate. "The princess has been doing well," Seren said, keeping her voice neutral. "She's eating more, sleeping better, allowing herself to be groomed." "Yes, I've heard the reports." Brenna circled them slowly, predator assessing prey. "My brother is quite impressed with your progress. He mentioned you specifically at dinner last night. An Omega servant earning the king's notice. How very unusual." The way she said it made it sound like an accusation. "I'm simply doing my job, my lady." "Are you?" Brenna stopped directly in front of her, close enough that Seren could smell her perfume, something floral and cloying that didn't quite mask the sharper scent of hostility beneath. "Tell me, little servant, where did you come from before Valdris?" The question hit like a fist to the stomach. "Various places, my lady. I traveled often." Traveled? How vague. Brenna's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You know, I've made inquiries about you." Seren with no family name, no verifiable history, no references beyond a letter that my sources tell me was almost certainly forged. Ice spread through Seren's veins. "My lady, Who are you really?" Brenna leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What are you running from? And what happens when my brother discovers you've been lying to him from the moment you entered this castle?" Behind her, Neve made a small sound, the first sound Seren had ever heard from her. Not a word. A whimper. The sound of a frightened child who didn't understand the danger swirling around her, but felt it nonetheless. Something in Seren snapped. "My lady." Her voice came out harder than she intended, hard enough to make Brenna's eyes widen slightly. "Whatever suspicions you have about me, this is not the place to discuss them. You're frightening the princess." For a long, terrible moment, something ugly flickered across Brenna's beautiful face. Then it smoothed away, replaced by a smile that was somehow worse. "Of course. How protective you've become." She stepped back, adjusting her gloves with deliberate casualness. "We'll continue this conversation later, when little ears aren't listening." She glided toward the door, then paused at the threshold. "A word of advice, servant. My brother may be impressed with you now, but his favor is a fragile thing. If I were you, I'd be very careful about getting too attached to things that don't belong to me." Then she was gone. Seren stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind racing through options that all led to the same terrifying conclusion. Lady Brenna was digging into her past, and if she found the truth, if she discovered what Seren had been accused of, what had really happened in Thornwick 5 years ago, everything would be destroyed. Her safety, her position, her tentative bond with the princess. Everything. She looked down at Neve, at the child who'd finally started to emerge from her shell, who'd finally found someone safe to trust, and felt her heart crack. "I should leave," she thought. "Disappear tonight before anyone can find out. Before I ruin everything." But then, Neve looked up at her with those gray eyes that weren't empty anymore, and her small hand reached up to touch Seren's cheek, the first time she'd ever initiated contact with Seren's face. And Seren knew she couldn't run. Not this time. Even if staying destroyed her. That night, a letter arrived at the servants' quarters. No signature, no seal, just 3 words written in elegant script. "I know everything." Seren burned it before anyone could see, but her hands were shaking, because somewhere in this castle, someone knew her secret, and it was only a matter of time before they decided to use it. The Harvest Moon celebration was the largest event in Valdris's calendar, a night when the castle opened its doors to nobility from across the 7 kingdoms. For 3 centuries, the royal family had hosted this feast, displaying their power and prosperity to allies and rivals alike. This year, for the first time since the Queen's death, Princess Neve was expected to attend. "It's too soon," Seren said, standing before Odessa in the head housekeeper's cramped office. "She's only just started to open up. Forcing her into a crowded hall full of strangers could undo everything. Odessa's expression was sympathetic but firm. "It's not my decision. The king has commanded it. The princess will make an appearance, however brief, to show the visiting dignitaries that she's recovering." But she isn't recovered. She still doesn't speak. She barely tolerates anyone besides— Seren caught herself, but too late. "Besides you," Odessa finished. "Yes, we're all aware. That's precisely why the king has requested you accompany her to the feast." Seren's stomach dropped. "Me? In the Great Hall? With the nobility?" "You'll remain in the background, of course, a servant attending her charge. But the king believes your presence will keep the princess calm." Odessa handed her a folded bundle of fabric, dark blue silk, finer than anything Seren had ever touched. "You'll wear this. Try not to draw attention to yourself." Impossible, Seren thought. An Omega servant accompanying the princess to the most important event of the year? Every eye would be on her, including Lady Brenna's. 3 days had passed since that threatening letter appeared. 3 days of jumping at shadows, of scanning every face for signs of recognition, of waiting for the axe to fall. It hadn't fallen yet. But tonight, surrounded by nobles from kingdoms she'd fled through, the risk multiplied 100-fold. She should refuse, should claim illness, should disappear into the kitchens and let someone else take this burden. But then she thought of Neve. Small, fragile Neve, who'd only just learned to smile again, being thrust into a crowd of strangers without anyone she trusted beside her. "I'll do it," Seren said quietly. She had no other choice. The great hall blazed with light. Thousands of candles glittered from chandeliers overhead, their flames reflected in polished marble floors and the jewels adorning every noble throat. Music drifted from somewhere unseen. A haunting melody played on strings and flutes that wove between conversations conducted in a dozen different languages. Seren stood in the shadows near the eastern entrance, Princess Neve's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The child wore white silk embroidered with silver thread, her pale hair braided with tiny moonflowers, and she looked like a ghost, beautiful and ethereal, and deeply, terribly frightened. "It's all right," Seren murmured, crouching to meet those wide gray eyes. "We don't have to stay long, just a few minutes, and then we can go back to our room." Our room. She'd started thinking of the nursery that way. Dangerous. Neve's fingers tightened around hers, but she didn't pull away, didn't retreat into herself. She simply pressed closer to Seren's side, seeking comfort from the only person who'd never demanded anything from her. The herald's voice boomed across the hall. "Her Royal Highness, Princess Neve of Valdris." Every head turned. The sea of faces was overwhelming, curious, pitying, calculating. Seren felt Neve stiffen beside her, felt the tremor that ran through that small body, and something fierce rose in her chest. "Look at me," she whispered. "Only at me. Pretend no one else exists." Neve's gaze locked onto hers, gray eyes anchoring themselves to Seren's face, as if it were the only solid thing in a shifting world. Together, they walked forward. The crowd parted before them, whispers trailing in their wake like smoke. "She's so pale? Is it true she hasn't spoken since— Who is that Omega with her? Surely not a servant." Seren kept her head high, her expression calm, her scent locked down so tight it ached. She was invisible. She was nothing. She was merely a servant doing her duty. But the princess held her hand as if she were everything. They reached the raised dais at the far end of the hall, where the king sat on his throne of black stone and silver. He wore formal attire tonight, a coat of deepest black trimmed with gray fur, his dark hair swept back from features that seemed carved from ice. His amber eyes tracked their approach, unreadable as always. Beside him, Lady Brenna sat in the queen's old seat, her green gown making her copper hair glow like flame. Her smile was beautiful and sharp as she watched her niece approach. "Your Majesty." Seren curtsied low, gently urging Neve to do the same. The princess didn't curtsy. Instead, She stepped closer to Seren, pressing her face against Seren's hip, hiding from the overwhelming crowd and the father who watched her with such careful blankness. A murmur rippled through the watching nobles. Neve? The king's voice was quiet but carried easily across the sudden silence. Come here. The child didn't move. If anything, she pressed closer to Seren, her fingers digging into the silk of Seren's borrowed dress. Seren's heart stopped. Refusing the king's command in front of the entire court, the scandal would be immense. The princess would be labeled unstable, broken, unfit. And Seren would be blamed for encouraging this defiance. She was about to pry Neve's hands away, to gently push her toward her father, when something unexpected happened. King Kale rose from his throne. The entire hall went still. The king never left his seat during formal audiences. Protocol demanded he remain elevated, distant, and untouchable. But he descended the steps now, each footfall echoing in the stunned silence, and stopped directly in front of his daughter. Then, slowly, the most powerful alpha in 7 kingdoms lowered himself to his knees. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a wine glass, the shattering crystal unnaturally loud. Neve. His voice was different now. Softer, rougher, stripped of its royal command. Just a father speaking to his daughter. I know you're frightened. You don't have to come to me if you're not ready. The princess peeked out from behind Seren's hip, her gray eyes wide. But I want you to know, the king continued, that I'm proud of you. For being here tonight. For being so brave. His gaze flickered to Seren for just a moment, a look she couldn't decipher, before returning to his child. And I'm grateful to the person who helped you find that bravery. Another ripple of whispers. The nobles were staring now. At the king on his knees. At the silent princess. At the nameless Omega servant who'd somehow become central to this unprecedented scene. Neve studied her father for a long moment. Then, tentatively, she released Seren's hand. Seren's chest ached as she watched the child take one step forward, then another. The king held perfectly still, not reaching for her, not demanding anything. Just waiting. Princess Neve stopped inches from him. Her small hand rose, trembling slightly, and touched his cheek. It was brief. A heartbeat of contact. But when she withdrew, something in the king's expression cracked. Just slightly. Just enough for Seren to glimpse the ocean of grief and love and desperate hope beneath his frozen exterior. Thank you, he breathed. Then Neve turned and walked back to Seren, reclaiming her hand with the quiet certainty of a child who'd found exactly where she belonged. The hall erupted in whispers that would become rumors that would spread across 7 kingdoms by morning. But Seren barely heard any of it, because King Kale was looking at her now. Really looking, not with suspicion or cold assessment, but with something that made her knees weak and her heart race. Gratitude, wonder, and something else. Something that looked dangerously close to recognition, as if he was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. That night, long after the feast ended and Neve had fallen asleep in her silver bed, a knock came at the nursery door. Seren opened it to find a royal guard. The king requests your presence, he said, immediately. The corridors were empty at this hour. All the visiting nobles retired to their guest chambers. All the servants finished with their duties. Seren's footsteps echoed too loudly on the marble floors as she followed the guard through passageways she'd never seen. Her mind raced with possibilities. Had Lady Brenna finally revealed her secrets? Had one of the foreign nobles recognized her from Thornwick? Was she walking toward her own execution? But the guard led her not to a dungeon or a council chamber, but to a small parlor in the royal wing. Intimate, warm, lit by a fire that crackled softly in the hearth. The walls were lined with books instead of weapons, and comfortable chairs replaced the formal furniture she'd expected. The king stood by the window, still dressed in his formal attire, though he'd removed the fur-trimmed coat. His white shirt was unlaced at the throat, his dark hair slightly disheveled, and he looked tired, profoundly, humanly tired. "Leave us," he said to the guard, without turning. The door closed. They were alone. Seren's pulse hammered. She kept her eyes lowered, her hands clasped before her, every muscle tensed for flight. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question. "You're the king, Your Majesty. Everyone fears you. But you didn't fear me tonight." He turned then, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "When my daughter hid behind you in front of the entire court, you didn't panic. You didn't push her toward me. You just held steady." "I was terrified, Your Majesty." "Perhaps. But you didn't let it control you." He moved closer, and Seren forced herself not to step back. "The previous caretakers would have sacrificed anything, including my daughter's fragile trust, to avoid my displeasure. But you protected her. Even from me." Seren's mouth went dry. "I wasn't protecting her from you, Your Majesty. I was just following her lead. And that's what makes you different." He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that she could see the individual threads of amber and gold in his eyes. "Everyone in this castle tries to anticipate what I want. They bend themselves into shapes they think will please me. But you don't. You do what's right for Neve, regardless of what it might cost you." She's a child who's been through more pain than anyone her age should endure. The words came out before Seren could stop them. She deserves someone who puts her first. "Yes." The king's voice roughened. "She does." Silence stretched between them, heavy with things unspoken. Seren could smell him now. Cedar and winter wind and something deeper, something that made her Omega instincts stir in ways she'd spent years suppressing. Dangerous. This was so dangerous. "Your Majesty." She forced her voice to remain steady. "Why did you summon me?" "I wanted to thank you." "Properly?" He moved to a small table where a decanter of wine sat beside 2 glasses. "Will you drink with me?" "That would be inappropriate, Your Majesty. I'm a servant. Tonight, you're the woman who gave my daughter back something I thought she'd lost forever." He poured 2 glasses anyway, held one out to her. "Please." It was the please that undid her. This powerful, terrifying man, asking rather than commanding. She took the glass. The wine was rich and warm, sliding down her throat like liquid courage. The king gestured to one of the comfortable chairs by the fire, and after a moment's hesitation, she sat. He took the chair across from her, close enough that their knees nearly touched. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Not the official story, not the forged references, the truth." Her blood turned to ice. "Your Majesty, I've known since the night we first met that you were hiding something. My sister has been digging into your past with the dedication of a hunting dog." His eyes held hers, steady and sure. "She's found inconsistencies, gaps, a trail that goes cold in a place called Thornwick." The wine glass trembled in Seren's hand. "What do you want from me?" "The truth. And I want it from your lips, not from whatever twisted version Brinna is constructing." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his intensity focused entirely on her. "I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you're running from. I care about my daughter. And you're the first person in 3 years who's made her better instead of worse." Tears burned behind Seren's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. "If I tell you," she whispered, "you might change your mind about that. Try me." The fire crackled. The wine warmed her belly. And for the first time in 5 years, Seren considered the impossible possibility of telling someone the truth. Not all of it. Not yet. But some of it. "There was a fire," she said quietly. 5 years ago. People died." The king's expression didn't change. "I was blamed for it. But I didn't do it. I swear on my life, on everything I am, I didn't start that fire." Her voice cracked. "But no one believed me. The man who accused me was powerful, respected, and I was just an Omega with no family, no status, No one to speak for me. So you ran? Yes. I ran. I've been running ever since. She looked up at him, expecting to see suspicion, doubt, and the cold calculation of a king deciding whether to believe a fugitive's story. Instead, she saw something that made her breath catch. Understanding. My wife died in a fire, he said quietly. 3 years ago. The official story is that it was an accident, a candle left burning, a curtain catching flame. But that was a lie. Seren went still. She was murdered. The words came out flat, toneless, the voice of a man who'd learned to bury his rage so deep it couldn't consume him. Someone set that fire deliberately, someone in this castle. And I've spent 3 years trying to find them without alerting them to my search. Your Majesty, Seren breathed. My daughter was there that night. She saw everything, and whatever she witnessed was so terrible it stole her voice. His hands clenched around his wineglass. So when you tell me you were blamed for a fire you didn't start, I believe you. Because I know better than anyone how flames can be used as weapons, and how easy it is to make the innocent look guilty. The tears she'd been fighting spilled over then, tracking silently down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. About your wife. About Neve. About everything. Don't be sorry. He reached out and his fingers brushed against her cheek, catching a tear. The touch was light, almost reverent, and impossibly gentle for hands that had killed in battle. Be careful. Whoever murdered my wife is still here, still watching. And now that you've become important to Neve, I've become a target, Seren finished. Perhaps. Or perhaps you've become something else entirely. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, wiping away the last of her tears. An ally. Someone I can trust. You barely know me. I know enough. His hand dropped, but the warmth of his touch lingered. I know you're brave. I know you're kind. I know my daughter loves you, and Neve has always been an excellent judge of character. Love. The word hit Seren like a physical blow. Your Majesty. Kale. The corner of his mouth curved just slightly. When we're alone like this, you may call me Kale. It was too much. The intimacy of his study, the warmth of the fire, the impossible softness in eyes that should have been cold. She was an Omega servant, a fugitive, a woman with nothing to offer but her secrets and her shame. And he was looking at her like she was something precious. I should go, she whispered. Neve might wake. Neve is being watched by guards I trust with my life. He rose when she did, standing close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Stay. Please. That word again. Please. Undoing all her defenses. I can't. Her voice broke. If someone sees me leaving your chambers at this hour, then let them see. Something fierce flickered in his amber gaze. I'm the king. I don't answer to anyone. But I do. She stepped back, putting distance between them before she did something foolish, like rise on her toes and press her lips to his. I answer to my duty to your daughter. And right now, that duty is more important than whatever this is. For a moment she thought he would argue, would command her to stay, would use his alpha authority to bend her to his will, but he simply nodded. You're right. Neve comes first. He moved to the door, opened it for her himself. But Seren? She paused at the threshold. This conversation isn't over. His voice dropped low, intimate, a promise that made her shiver. I'll find out who blamed you for that fire, and I'll find out who killed my wife. And when I do... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Seren fled into the darkened corridor, her heart pounding, her lips tingling with a kiss that hadn't happened. Not yet, whispered a treacherous voice in her mind. Not yet. The weeks following the harvest moon celebration passed in a strange, dreamlike blur. Neve continued to improve. She ate full meals now, slept through the night, allowed herself to be bathed and dressed without resistance. She still didn't speak, but she communicated in other ways, pointing at things she wanted, tugging Seren's hand when she wished to go somewhere, pressing close when she was tired or overwhelmed. And she smiled. Not often, not broadly, but more frequently than before. The court noticed. The servants whispered. And Lady Brinna watched with eyes that grew sharper and more calculating by the day. But it was the king's attention that Seren couldn't escape. He found reasons to visit the nursery now, to check on Neve's progress, he claimed, or to bring his daughter small gifts. A wooden horse carved by his own hands, a picture book with illustrations of wolves running under moonlight. A blanket so soft Neve refused to sleep without it. But his eyes always found Seren first, and lingered. "You're staring again," she murmured one afternoon as they watched Neve arrange her growing collection of wooden animals on the nursery floor. "Am I?" He didn't sound remotely apologetic. "Perhaps I simply enjoy the view." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Your Majesty." "Kale. Kale." The name felt forbidden on her tongue. "People are starting to talk." "People always talk. It's what they do when they have nothing better to occupy their minds." He moved closer, his shoulder brushing against hers. "Does it bother you? The attention?" "Yes. No. I don't know. I'm trying to keep your daughter safe," she said carefully. "The more visible I become, the harder that becomes. Or perhaps the more visible you become, the more protection you're afforded." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "No one would dare harm someone the king watches over. Unless the person wanting to harm me is clever enough to do it subtly." She finally met his eyes, found them burning with that amber fire she was coming to know too well. "Lady Brinna hasn't stopped investigating me. She's sent inquiries to every village I passed through in the last 5 years." A muscle ticked in the king's jaw. "I'm aware." "And you're not going to stop her?" "If I forbid her investigation, she'll simply conduct it in secret. Better to let her work in the open, where I can monitor what she discovers." He reached out, his fingers catching a strand of hair that had escaped her braid and tucking it behind her ear. The gesture was impossibly intimate. "I won't let her hurt you, Seren." "You might not have a choice." Her voice cracked. "Whatever she finds, will change nothing." His hand cupped her cheek, tilting her face up to his. Nothing. They were too close now. Anyone walking by would see them like this. The king touching a servant's face with all the tenderness of a lover. This was madness. This was suicide. This was... "Papa?" They sprung apart. Neve stood just a few feet away, her gray eyes wide, her wooden wolf clutched to her chest. She was looking between them with an expression Seren couldn't read. "Yes, sweetheart." Kale's voice was remarkably steady, considering. "What is it?" The princess didn't respond. Instead, she walked directly to Seren and reached up with her free hand. Seren crouched automatically, bringing herself to the child's level. "What do you need, little one?" Neve touched her face, the same gesture her father had made just moments before. Her small fingers traced Seren's cheekbone, her brow, the curve of her jaw. Then she turned to her father and did the same thing, her hand mapping his features with the same intense concentration. Seren exchanged a bewildered glance with Kale. The princess stepped back, studied them both, and then, slowly, deliberately, she pushed Seren toward her father. "Neve," Seren started. "What are you—" The child pushed again. Insistent, determined. "I think," Kale said, an edge of wonder in his voice. "My daughter is trying to tell us something." Neve nodded vigorously, the most animated response she'd ever given. Then she pointed at Seren, pointed at her father, and brought her hands together, interlacing her fingers. The message was unmistakable. Heat flooded Seren's face. "Your Highness, that's not... We're not..." But Neve was already walking away, returning to her wooden animals with the satisfied air of a child who'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. Kale laughed. A real laugh, warm and surprised and utterly disarming. "Well, It seems my daughter approves of you. She's a child. She doesn't understand. Children understand more than we give them credit for. He caught her hand before she could pull away, held it gently in his own. Seren, look at me. She didn't want to. Looking at him meant drowning, but she looked anyway. Something is happening between us, he said quietly. I've tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was gratitude, or proximity, or simple loneliness. But it's more than that. And I think you feel it too. Her heart was going to beat out of her chest. It doesn't matter what I feel. You're the king. I'm a servant. I'm a fugitive. I'm everything I never knew I needed. He brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that made her knees weak. When my wife died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. I made myself cold, made myself stone, because the alternative was drowning in grief. But then you came, and Neve started healing, and I started what? She breathed, wanting. The word was rough, torn from somewhere deep. Wanting things I'd convinced myself I'd never want again. A partner, a family, a future that wasn't just duty and revenge. Tears blurred her vision. Kale. You don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever, if you don't feel the same. He released her hand, stepped back, gave her space she simultaneously craved and hated. But I needed you to know. Before Brenna discovers whatever she's going to discover, before everything becomes complicated, I needed you to know that you matter to me. Not as Neve's caretaker. As you. Seren stood frozen, her mind spinning, her heart aching. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself, to protect him, to disappear before the inevitable devastation arrived. But Neve was watching from across the room, her gray eyes bright with something that looked painfully like hope. And Kale was looking at her with an expression that made her believe, for just a moment, that maybe she deserved something good. I feel it too, she whispered. The words hung between them, fragile and terrifying and true. Kale's eyes blazed. He took a step toward her. The nursery door crashed open. Lady Brenna stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards, her beautiful face twisted with triumph. Brother. Her voice dripped with poisonous satisfaction. I think you'll want to see what my investigation has uncovered. She held up a rolled parchment sealed with wax. It seems your precious Omega isn't just a fugitive. She's a murderer, convicted of killing an entire noble family, including 3 children, in Thornwick 5 years ago. The world tilted. Seren couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand frozen as her carefully constructed life crumbled to dust around her. That's a lie, she managed. Is it? Brenna's smile widened. The documents are quite detailed. Witness statements, a confession signed by your own hand, a warrant for your arrest that's still active to this day. I never confessed. I never... Guards. Brenna's voice rang with authority. Seize her. No. The word came from Kale, sharp as a blade. No one touches her without my command. Brother. She's a convicted murderer. She's been living in your castle, caring for your daughter. I said no one touches her. The king's voice dropped to something dangerous, something that made even the guards step back. Everyone out. Now. Except you, Brenna. You stay. The guards retreated. But before the door closed, Seren saw the parchment in Brenna's hand, saw the seal she recognized with sickening clarity. The seal of Lord Edric Thorne. The man who'd actually started the fire. The man who'd framed her. The man she'd been running from for 5 years. He'd found her. And now everything. Neve's trust, Kale's affection, the fragile new life she'd built, was about to burn to ash. Just like everything else she'd ever loved. The silence in the nursery was suffocating. Neve had retreated to the corner of the room, clutching her wooden wolf, her gray eyes darting between the adults with growing distress. She could feel the tension, the danger, even if she couldn't understand it. Seren wanted to go to her. wanted to gather that small, fragile body in her arms and promise that everything would be all right. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand frozen as Lady Brenna unrolled the damning parchment with theatrical slowness. "The fire at Thornwick Manor," Brenna read aloud, her voice dripping with satisfaction. 17 dead, including Lord Aldrich Vance, his wife Lady Mira, and their 3 children, ages 9, 7, and 4. She looked up, her green eyes glittering. 4 years old, brother, the same age as Neve. Cale's expression was carved from stone. Continue. "The sole survivor and primary suspect, an Omega servant named Saren, who was seen fleeing the property moments after the fire began. She was captured 3 days later, confessed under questioning, and was sentenced to death." Brenna smiled. But somehow she escaped before the sentence could be carried out. And now, 5 years later, here she is, caring for your daughter. "I didn't do it." Serene's voice came out hoarse, barely recognizable. "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't confess. Whatever document you have bears your signature." Brenna thrust the parchment toward her. "See for yourself." Serene's hand shook as she took the document. Her eyes scanned the elegant script, the accusations, the witness statements, the detailed account of a crime she hadn't committed. And there, at the bottom, a signature that looked almost like hers. Almost. "This is forged," she whispered. "I never signed this. I never confessed to anything." "How convenient." Brenna turned to Cale. "Brother, surely you see what's happening here. This woman has manipulated her way into your home, your daughter's affections, your—" Her eyes flickered between them knowingly. "Your trust. And all while hiding the blood of children on her hands." "I said the signature is forged." Serene's voice rose despite herself. "Lord Edric Thorne framed me. He started that fire, killed those people, and blamed me because I saw—" "Lord Edric Thorne?" Brenna laughed. "The most respected nobleman in Thornwick? The man who rebuilt the village after the tragedy, who funded orphanages and hospitals in memory of the victims? That Lord Edric Thorne?" Serene's stomach turned. Of course he'd made himself into a hero. Of course he'd used the tragedy he'd created to elevate himself even further. That was exactly the kind of monster he was. "He's a murderer," she said flatly, "and a liar, and whatever connection you have to him. Careful." Brenna's smile vanished. "Accusing a lady of the court of conspiracy is treason." "Enough." Cale's voice cut through the room like a blade. Both women fell silent. "Brenna, leave us." "Brother, you can't seriously be considering—" "I said leave." Something dangerous flickered in Brenna's eyes, a calculation, a weighing of odds. Then she smoothed her expression into careful neutrality. "Of course, Your Majesty." She curtsied, low and mocking. "But I should mention that I've already sent word to Lord Thorne. He'll be arriving within the week to collect his fugitive. I assumed you'd want justice served." The words hit Serene like a physical blow. Thorne was coming here, to Valdris, to finish what he'd started 5 years ago. "Get out," Cale growled. Brenna left, her silk skirts whispering against the stone floor. The door clicked shut behind her. For a long moment neither Serene nor Cale moved. The fire crackled. Neve whimpered softly in her corner. "Cale." Serene's voice broke. "I know how this looks. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I swear on everything I am. Tell me what really happened." She looked up, found his amber eyes fixed on her face, not with anger or suspicion, but with something that made her heart crack. Trust. Despite everything, he still trusted her. "The Vance family took me in when I was 18, she began, the words rushing out like water from a broken dam. "I had no family, no pack, nothing. They gave me a home, let me work as a companion to Lady Mira. For 3 years I was happy. The closest thing to happy I'd ever been." Cale nodded slowly. "And then?" "Lord Edric Thorne came to visit. He was Lady Mira's cousin, a powerful lord from a neighboring territory. At first, he seemed charming, attentive. Her throat tightened. But I caught him one night in Lord Aldrich's study, going through private documents, financial records, military plans, things that could be sold to enemy kingdoms for a fortune. Understanding dawned in Cale's eyes. He was a spy. Yes. And when he realized I'd seen him, she couldn't continue, couldn't describe the terror of that night, the way he'd cornered her, the threats he'd whispered in her ear. He hurt you. Cale's voice was deadly quiet. He tried. I fought back. Escaped. Told Lord Aldrich everything. He believed me. He was going to report Thorn to the regional council the next morning. Tears streamed down her face now, unstoppable. But that morning never came. The fire started that night. It moved so fast, too fast to be natural. I tried to save them. The children. I tried to get to them. But the flames were everywhere, and then Thorn's men grabbed me and he blamed you for the crime he committed. Cale's jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscles trembling. Made himself the grieving hero while you rotted in a cell. I escaped before the execution. I've been running ever since. She laughed bitterly. And now he's coming here to finish the job. Silence fell between them, heavy with grief and rage and impossible choices. Then a small hand tugged at Serene's dress. She looked down to find Neve standing beside her, gray eyes swimming with tears. The princess touched Serene's face, her wet cheeks, her trembling lips with heartbreaking gentleness. It's all right, little one, Serene managed. I'm all right. But Neve shook her head. Her small face crumpled with distress, and then she did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She opened her mouth. Ma. Serene's heart stopped. Ma. Ma. The word was rusty, uncertain, the voice of a child who'd forgotten how to use it. But it was unmistakable. Mama. Serene dropped to her knees, gathering Neve into her arms, sobbing openly now. Oh, sweetheart. Oh, my brave, beautiful girl. Neve clung to her, face buried in Serene's neck, small body shaking. Mama, she said again, stronger this time. Mama, Mama, don't go. Don't go away. The words shattered something inside Serene and rebuilt it into something new, something fierce and unbreakable. I won't, she whispered. I won't ever leave you. I promise. She looked up at Cale through her tears and found him staring at them both, his expression stripped of all its careful coldness. He looked raw, wrecked, and utterly, devastatingly beautiful. She spoke. He breathed. She finally spoke. For you. Serene pulled back just enough to look into Neve's face. This precious child who'd chosen her, who'd called her mother, who'd broken 3 years of silence to beg her to stay. She did it for you, sweetheart, because you're the bravest person I've ever known. Neve shook her head stubbornly. For you, she whispered. Stay, please. Cale crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside them. His arms came around them both, Serene and Neve together, holding them against his chest as if he could shield them from everything the world might throw at them. She stays, he said roughly. No matter what happens, no matter what Thorn claims or Brenna schemes, she stays. This is my command as king. Serene should have felt relief, should have felt safe. But she knew Edric Thorn, knew the lengths he would go to protect his secrets, the bodies he'd already left in his wake. If he was coming to Valdris, it wasn't just for her. It was to silence everyone who might learn the truth, including the king, including Neve. Kyle, she whispered against his chest. He's dangerous, more dangerous than you know. If he comes here, then let him come. Kyle's voice was iron. I've been hunting my wife's killer for 3 years. Perhaps it's time I let the killer come to me. Serene's blood ran cold. What do you mean? The fire that killed my wife. His arms tightened around them. It moved too fast to be natural. Sound familiar? The implication crashed over her like a wave. The same method. The same impossible speed. the same signature of a murderer who'd never been caught. You think Thorn? She couldn't finish. I think there are no coincidences. Cale pulled back, his amber eyes blazing with fury that had been banked for 3 long years. And I think the man who's coming to claim you might just be the man I've been hunting all along. The days before Lord Edric Thorne's arrival passed in a blur of preparation. Cale tripled the guards around the nursery and assigned his most trusted warriors to protect Neve and Seren at all times. He sent discreet inquiries to neighboring kingdoms, searching for any connection between Thorn and the fire that had killed Queen Isolde. And he interviewed every servant, every guard, every noble who'd been in the castle the night his wife died. Seren watched him work and marveled at the man beneath the crown. He was relentless, methodical, driven by a grief he'd channeled into purpose. Every stone he overturned, every question he asked, brought him closer to the truth he'd been seeking for 3 years. But Brenna was relentless too. She appeared at every meal, smiling her poisonous smile, dropping comments designed to undermine Seren's position. It must be so strange for you, living like this, almost like being a real person. I wonder what the court will say when Lord Thorn arrives, the testimony of such a respected nobleman against the word of an Omega servant. My brother has always had a weakness for broken things. Don't mistake his pity for something more. Seren endured it all, her jaw clenched, her scent carefully controlled. She would not give Brenna the satisfaction of seeing her crack. But on the 5th night, something changed. She was sitting in the nursery, watching Neve sleep, when the door opened silently. Seren tensed, reaching for the small knife she'd begun carrying beneath her dress. It's me. Cale's voice was low, urgent. We need to talk. She relaxed fractionally. What's wrong? He closed the door behind him, crossed to where she sat, and handed her a folded parchment. One of my investigators found this in my wife's belongings. It was hidden in a book, a journal she kept secretly. Seren unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, but the words made her blood freeze. I know who started the fire in Thornwick. It was E.T., the same man who's been threatening me for months. He wants access to Cale, to our military secrets, to the kingdom itself. I've refused his advances, rejected his offers of alliance. Now he's grown bolder. Tonight he sent a message. Comply or burn like the others. The entry was dated 3 days before Queen Isolde's death. E.T., Seren breathed. Edric Thorn. My wife knew. Cale's voice was rough with barely contained rage. She knew what he was, tried to protect us, and he murdered her for it. And Neve? Seren asked. The healer who examined Neve after the fire found traces of smoke in her lungs, but also something else. A sedative. Someone drugged her before the fire started, probably to ensure she wouldn't escape. His hands clenched. Thorn wanted no witnesses. But somehow, my daughter survived. And saw something that traumatized her into silence. Seren looked at the sleeping child, her heart breaking all over again. She's been carrying this for 3 years, holding onto a secret she couldn't speak. Until you came? Cale knelt beside her, taking her hands. You gave her safety. You gave her permission to heal. And now that she's speaking again, she might remember. Seren finished. She might be able to tell us exactly what happened that night. The implication hung between them. Heavy, terrifying, crucial. If Neve could remember, if she could identify Thorn as her mother's killer, they would have the testimony they needed to expose him. Not just for the Thornwick fire, but for the murder of a queen. But asking a traumatized child to relive her worst nightmare. I won't force her, Seren said firmly. Whatever she remembers, it has to come naturally. I won't push her back into that darkness. I know. Cale lifted her hands to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. That's why I trust you with her. That's why I trust you with everything. She should have pulled away. Should have maintained the distance that was already crumbling between them. Instead, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. We'll face him together, she whispered. Whatever happens. Together. He breathed the word like a vow. Lord Edric Thorne arrived on the 7th day. He came with an escort of 50 men, a carriage gilded in gold, and a smile that made Seren's skin crawl from across the courtyard. He was handsome. She'd forgotten how handsome. Tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes like polished jade. He looked like a hero from a storybook, the kind of man ballads were written about. And he was the most dangerous person she'd ever known. King Cale. Thorne's voice boomed across the courtyard as he dismounted. What an honor to visit your magnificent castle. I only wish the circumstances were more pleasant. Cale descended the steps, flanked by his personal guard. His expression was carefully neutral, but Seren could see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled fury in his eyes. Lord Thorne, you've traveled far. Justice demands no less. Thorne's gaze swept the assembled crowd until it found Seren, standing in the shadows near the nursery entrance. His smile widened. Ah, there she is, the fugitive who's caused so much trouble. He started toward her. Cale stepped into his path. The accused will remain in my custody until a formal hearing can be arranged. That is my command. Something flickered behind Thorne's pleasant mask. Annoyance, quickly suppressed. Of course, Your Majesty. I wouldn't dream of circumventing proper procedure. He bowed with excessive courtesy. Though I hope the hearing will be soon. Justice delayed is justice denied, as they say. Tomorrow, Cale said flatly, the Great Hall. You'll have your chance to present your evidence. And she'll have her chance to present hers? Thorne's eyebrow rose. How remarkably fair of you, considering her crimes. Everyone deserves the chance to speak their truth, even the guilty. The words were pointed, deliberate. Seren saw Thorne's smile falter for just a moment before it returned, sharper than before. Indeed, he murmured. Indeed they do. He turned and strode toward the guest quarters, his men following in formation. Cale waited until he was gone before moving to Seren's side. Are you all right? No. She was shaking. Seeing him again, it brings everything back. He won't touch you. Cale's hand found hers, squeezed firmly. I swear it. But as Seren watched Thorne's retreating figure, she saw him pause at the entrance to the guest wing. His head turned slightly, his green eyes finding the nursery windows, where Neve stood watching, her small face pale with terror. And Edric Thorne smiled. The hearing was held at midday, the great hall packed with nobles and servants alike. Word had spread through the castle like wildfire. The king's Omega was on trial for murder, and the most respected lord in the Eastern Territories had come to deliver justice. Seren stood before the assembled crowd, her hands bound with ceremonial rope, a humiliation Thorne had insisted upon. Cale sat on his throne, his expression carved from stone, Brenna smirking beside him. And in the gallery, hidden behind a curtain with her guards, Neve watched. Seren hadn't wanted her there. Had begged Cale to keep the child away from this spectacle. But Neve had refused to stay behind, had clutched Seren's hand and whispered, Need to see. Need to remember. The words had chilled Seren to the bone. Lords and ladies of Valdris, Thorne began, his voice ringing through the hall. I come before you today with a heavy heart. 5 years ago, a terrible tragedy befell my cousin's family. 17 innocent souls lost to flames, including 3 precious children. He paused, letting the murmurs of sympathy wash over him. The woman responsible stands before you now. She wormed her way into that household, gained their trust, and when she was discovered stealing from them, she set the fire to cover her crimes. His green eyes found Seren's. She is a murderer, a monster, and she must face justice. That's a lie. Seren's voice rang out clear and strong. Every word of it. The crowd stirred. Thorne's smile tightened. You deny your confession? He held up the damning parchment. Your own signature is forged. She turned to address the crowd directly. Lord Thorne is the true murderer. He was selling military secrets to enemy kingdoms, And when Lord Aldrich discovered his betrayal, Thorn silenced him and everyone else who might have known the truth. Gasps erupted. Thorn laughed, a rich, dismissive sound. How desperate, how pathetic. He spread his hands. I have documents, witness statements, evidence that has been verified by 3 separate courts. And what does she have? The word of an Omega fugitive who has spent 5 years hiding from justice. She has more than that. Every head turned as King Kale rose from his throne. Your Majesty? Thorn's composure flickered. Surely you don't believe. I believe evidence. Kale descended the steps, a folded parchment in his hand. This is a journal entry written by my late wife, Queen Isolde, 3 days before her death. The hall went deathly silent. In it, she identifies a man using the initials E.T. as the person who started the fire in Thornwick. She describes his threats against her, his demands for access to military secrets, and her fear that he would kill her if she continued to refuse him. Thorn's face drained of color. That could be anyone. She also describes a distinctive scar on his left hand. Kale's voice hardened. Shaped like a crescent moon, a scar you've made no effort to hide, Lord Thorn. Every eye turned to Thorn's hands. He clasped them behind his back, but not before the crowd glimpsed the silvery mark curving across his skin. This proves nothing, Thorn snarled, his pleasant mask crumbling. The ravings of a dead woman? And the testimony of a living child? The hall erupted in whispers as the curtain parted and Neve stepped forward, her small hand clutched tightly by her guard. Serene's heart stopped. No, not like this. She's not ready. But Neve walked steadily down the center aisle, her gray eyes fixed on Thorn's face. When she reached the open space before the throne, she stopped and pointed directly at him. You. Her voice was small but steady, the voice of a child who'd been silent for 3 years and had finally found her words. You were there, the night Mama died. I saw you. The crowd gasped. Thorn stumbled backward. You came to her room. She told you to leave. You. Neve's voice wavered, tears streaming down her face. You hurt her, made fire come. Then you came for me. But Mama saved me. She hid me before the fire took her. She's lying. Thorn's voice rose to a desperate pitch. She's been coached, manipulated. She's been silent for 3 years. Kale's voice cut through his protests like a blade. She couldn't have been coached because she couldn't speak. Until now. Until she saw the face of the man who killed her mother and found the courage to name him. Thorn looked around wildly, seeking allies, finding none. Even Brenna had gone pale, her smirk vanished, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Brenna. He turned to her, desperation bleeding through. Tell them about our arrangement. You promised... Arrangement? Kale's voice dropped dangerously. Sister? What arrangement? Brenna's mouth opened and closed. I didn't know. He told me she was guilty. He showed me evidence. I thought I was helping you. You were helping the man who murdered my wife. Kale's amber eyes blazed. The man who tried to murder my daughter. For what? Power? Position? He promised me? Brenna's voice broke. When Neve was declared unfit. When you remarried at my urging, he would support my children's claim to the throne. I didn't know he was the killer. I swear, Kale, I didn't know. Guards! Kale's command cracked through the hall. Seize them both. Thorn bolted. He made it 3 steps before Seren moved. 5 years of running had made her fast, had honed her reflexes to razor sharpness. She swept his legs from beneath him, sent him crashing to the marble floor, and pressed her bound hands against his throat before he could rise. You took everything from me, she hissed. My home, my name, my peace. And you tried to take them from her too. A child who'd done nothing wrong. Thorn snarled, struggled, but she held firm. You should have killed me when you had the chance, she continued. Because I'm the one who brought you down. Me, the worthless Omega servant you thought no one would believe. Guards surrounded them, pulling Seren back, dragging Thorn to his feet. But before they could haul him away, Neve stepped forward one final time. She looked up at the man who'd murdered her mother, who'd stolen her voice, who'd haunted her nightmares for 3 long years, and she spoke with a clarity that rang through the silent hall. "Bad man," she said simply, "go away and never come back." Thorn flinched as if struck. The guards were dragging Thorn toward the doors when Neve moved again. She crossed the marble floor with purpose, her small feet padding softly in the stunned silence, and stopped directly in front of Seren. Then, loud enough for every noble in the hall to hear, she spoke. "Mama." The word echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Gasps erupted. Whispers exploded through the crowd like wildfire. Did she just... The princess called that Omega. But she's a servant. Seren dropped to her knees, gathering Neve into her arms, too overwhelmed to care about propriety or scandal or the hundreds of eyes fixed upon them. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm here. Mama's here." And from his place before the throne, King Kale smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded, and the whispers shifted to something else entirely. Wonder. The trial lasted 3 more days. Evidence mounted. Financial records linking Thorn to enemy kingdoms, testimony from servants who'd seen him in places he shouldn't have been, a full accounting of his crimes that stretched back 15 years. The Thornwick fire, Queen Isolda's murder, a dozen other accidents that had eliminated rivals and silenced witnesses. Edric Thorn was sentenced to death. His execution would take place at the next full moon. Lady Brinna was stripped of her title and banished to a remote convent in the northern mountains. She went quietly, unable to meet her brother's eyes, her ambition finally broken against the wall of her own mistakes. And Seren? Seren was free. The false charges were dismissed, her name officially cleared. King Kyle issued a royal proclamation declaring her innocent of all crimes. The victim of a conspiracy that had cost her 5 years of her life. But more than that. "Marry me." Seren stared at Kale, certain she'd misheard. They were standing in the nursery, the same room where everything had begun. Late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and turning everything gold. Neve played nearby, her wooden animals arranged in elaborate formations, her soft voice narrating adventures that made both adults smile. She spoke freely now, the words flowing easier every day, 3 years of silence washing away like morning frost. "You can't be serious," Seren managed. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Kale took her hands, his amber eyes burning with certainty. "You gave my daughter her voice back. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. You stood before an entire court and faced down the man who destroyed your life, and won. I'm an Omega, a servant. I have nothing to offer you. You have everything." He dropped to his knees before her, and Seren's breath caught at the sight of the most powerful alpha in 7 kingdoms kneeling at her feet. Courage, kindness, strength, the ability to love my daughter as if she were your own. "She is my own." The words came out before Seren could stop them. "I love her. I've loved her since the moment she touched my hand. And I love you." Kale's voice roughened. "Not because you saved Neve, not because you helped me find justice, because you are the most remarkable person I've ever known, and I can't imagine spending another day without you by my side." Tears blurred Seren's vision. "The court will never accept. The court will accept what I tell them to accept. I am the king, and I'm choosing you." "Mama?" Neve's small voice interrupted them. She'd abandoned her wooden animals and crossed to stand beside them, her gray eyes solemn. "You stay now? Forever?" Seren looked at the child who'd chosen her, who'd broken 3 years of silence to call her mother. At the man who knelt before her, offering everything she'd never dared to want. And for the first time in 5 years, she stopped running. "Yes," she whispered. "Forever." Neve threw herself into Seren's arms with a squeal of joy. Kyle rose and wrapped them both in his embrace, his heart beating strong and steady against Seren's cheek. Together, he murmured, all of us. A family. A family, Seren repeated, the word tasting like honey on her tongue. She'd spent so long running from the past that she'd forgotten to hope for a future. But here it was, warm and real, and holding her tight. A daughter who'd found her voice, a king who'd found his heart, and an Omega who'd finally found her home. 6 months later, Seren stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Her hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly, where a new life grew, a sibling for Neve, another thread in the tapestry of their impossible, beautiful family. Below, in the courtyard, she could hear Neve's laughter as she chased the castle dogs, her voice bright and clear. The child had blossomed in the months since Thorn's execution, still quiet, still thoughtful, but no longer locked away inside herself. She smiled freely now, laughed often, and every night, before bed, she climbed into Seren's lap and said, "Tell me a story, Mama, Mama." The words still made Seren's heart ache with joy. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into Kale's warmth. "She's getting faster," he observed, watching his daughter sprint across the cobblestones. "Soon the dogs won't be able to keep up." "She gets that from you." Seren smiled. "The stubbornness, too." "Lies. That's entirely your influence." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "How are you feeling? Happy?" She turned in his arms, looked up at his face, still beautiful, still sharp, but softer now. Warmer. Terrified. Grateful. All of it at once. That sounds about right. His hand covered hers on her belly, his amber eyes glowing with a love that still took her breath away. "We've come a long way from that nursery." "We have." She thought of all the steps that had brought them here. The desperate hope of a silent child reaching out. The careful trust built in quiet moments. The fire of truth burning away years of lies. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real." "It's real." He kissed her softly, thoroughly. "This is real. You and me and Neve and whoever this little one turns out to be. Our family. Our future." "Papa!" Neve's voice rang out from below. "Mama, come play." Seren laughed, pulling back from Kale's embrace. "Our queen commands." "Then we'd better obey." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers as naturally as breathing. "Ready?" Seren looked at the man she loved, at the castle that had become her home, at the child waiting impatiently in the courtyard below, and smiled. "Always." Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. Your support means everything, and I always love hearing from you. Until next time.